and we should be live.
Hello, everyone. This is Joe Atwell and Jan Irvin. We're broadcasting from a different venue today. We had been broadcasting from CCN, but as it turns out, Jan and I both would like to have just broadcasting from separate entity of CCN, the venue. And so we're going to, and I don't have any energy to put into doing more than two shows in a week. So we're just going to be doing the what we call the UnSpun show here on the Gnostic Media site. This is in no way a criticism of CCN. We really want that network to be supported. We will try to support it in the future, and don't be at all surprised if we come back for doing shows with CCN in the future. But it's just at the moment we've got this project that Jan has laid out of trying to establish basically our own YouTube network via Gnostic Media. So anyway, Jan, do you have any comments on any of that?
Oh, well, likewise, I wish CCN well. I don't have anything against them. It's just we think we can expand the audience reach with my own channel on YouTube. And so right now we've got about 21 people watching live. We will be taking questions from the audience. This way we can also interact directly with the audience, whereas before we couldn't. So this way there's going to be direct interaction, and the number of people watching is growing pretty quickly there. So I
just wanted to say, Jan, that's really an important thing because Jan and I do so much media. I have two shows, one with Jan and one with Dr. Russell on Friday at Resolution Radio. And then I also do a lot of interviews. So imagine having like 6 or 7 hours a week of talking. It's really going to be refreshing to have the audience basically give us feedback as to what they want us to discuss, because I don't know about you, Jan, but sometimes it just feels like a little like I get kind of stale when I have to do so much media in a particular week and I just don't have any new ideas. Here, we're going to get the audience to, tell us stuff that they don't like or whatever. We'll get feedback. I think that's going to be kind of both fun and of value to the audience in general, because a lot of the comments are really, stuff you and I wouldn't have considered. But it's also going to be less stressful.
I agree with you. And so, and that was kind of the general idea today, was just to, field questions from the audience. We'll be reading the chat box on the YouTube live stream. So, if anybody wants to figure out, and I'm in the small window today, we'll figure out the rest of the settings and try to get things going side by side again in the future weeks. We try to get Zoom doing that just now, and for some reason I couldn't get Zoom to do the side-by-side on my side, so we'll have to fiddle with that, hopefully get it worked out by next week. If anybody has any ideas how to fix that, I'd be happy for you to send me any tips.
Yeah, I have, I had a thought, though, that I wanted to discuss. It's loneliness, and how it's part of the atomization. If you just look at my life, you'd see that it looks, from above, it looks perfect. I have pretty much what people would want. And I have lots of friends, too. But one thing I notice is that I really have very few that I would say I have that kind of brotherhood, that sort of defend to the death kind of connection that existed in the 50s when I was growing up in these ethnic neighborhoods where people related to one another in almost a tribal way. And particularly, there was this ethnic pride, and it wasn't necessarily like just Irish, Polish, Italian, though that was part of it. but there was just kind of a sense of being, like a kid in middle class white America. And there was a kind of brotherhood that I think even then there was some pressure against it to make it separate, to atomize it. But we definitely felt it. And as I've gotten older, I've noticed that the relationships I've had, the old ones have that kind of closeness. But the relationships I make in the last 20 years reflect the kind of atomization. And I just wanted to comment that I think when people experience that, when they experience the kind of the lack of that really connected emotional relationship with the people that they know, it puts them off. They feel, I think everyone feels a little bit slightly off kilter because of it. And that's correct. That's the right way to feel, because there's something wrong in your life. I mean, we are social animals. We evolved in very tightly knit social environments. And when we don't have that, we have a problem in our life. And I just want to say that we can see now with all of the research that we've done that there was a deliberate assault upon, the ethnicity, the family, the extended family, and then even, between men and women, we've just been atomized down to these individuals. And this is then reflected finally at the end of all this process in this kind of sense of loneliness. And so what I wanted to note is that when you experience it, that's really your emotional system telling you that you need to change your social circumstance. And so, I don't have a lot of tips as to how to create that kind of bond between oneself and all of the people that, you interact with. But I think if you're aware of it, if you're aware of the need and of the value of those kinds of connections, then whenever an opportunity occurs, you'll see how valuable it is and how it really can't be put aside, that it is like the establishment of a family. The establishment of that kind of connection with friends is just as much a part of the, of a healthy psychology. And so you really have to take the time to create these bonds, to figure out how to do them, and then once they are established, to not lose them.
Absolutely correct. I agree. It's like, I have some friends from high school still, that I've been friends with for 25 plus years or whatever. And there's definitely a different level of friendship there than with newer people and what you can discuss and things like that. We do have a number of people making comments in the live chat thing. One person's complaining about the chalkboard sound of your squeaking chair.
Tell them that's a trademark.
I don't have to tell them; they can hear you.
Now I have a question. I'd like to see it. I don't have the ability right now to look at these things. What would I click on? You sent me some link to be able to.
Yeah, it's in your Skype chat. You should be able to click the link and just read the live chat there. But Shim the Penman is asking if people have approached us trying to silence us. And I would say, we get hackers, trolls, threats, all kinds of stuff pretty regularly. Gaslighting. Last year, the Gnostic Media website was under attack for about 6 or 8 months straight. I've had threat calls in the middle of the night. I've had all kinds of stuff. So yeah, they definitely try to scare us and shut us up. They've tried numerous tactics to try and get us back into line, especially when I published the first article on Gordon Wasson, the man, the legend, the myth. And, I was attacked by the entire field of ethnomycology that I had worked with for a decade, and not one of them to this day, and that article was released 5 years ago, and not one of them to this day has ever addressed the actual research. They've only made personal attacks. That's it. Not one of them ever has gone through the work. So until they're capable of actually going through the citations and research, I don't really care about their their opinions of the work, because if they're only making ad hominem attacks and appeals to ridicule and whatnot, it doesn't matter what they say. What matters is what the documents say, that these people are clearly trying to cover it up. And if you and I are correct, Joe, then that means that the entire field of ethnobotany has been wrong and has been fooling people for 55, 60 years.
Well, it was corrupted. I mean,
it was started by Gordon Wasson, who we know is MK Ultra Subproject 58.
I think there's been probably a lot of really good people swept up into it. And I actually, sure. I was discussing this with Robert Forte last week. The conversation, it covered the topic of if, the operation to create the counterculture ever came across a legitimate mystic or a legitimate seeker for the kind of spiritual growth that was sold to the hippies, that comes from the different drugs, that would have been something that would have been absolutely precious to them, because then they would have had basically an agent that couldn't be shattered, because they would have had someone who was like literally drinking the Kool-Aid on their own, and then could just be put into culture without any single concern about whether or not that individual would be, ever turned, because he would be authentic. If you look at like the MK Ultra Union Party, you can sense that every single person there, and the way they talk, and every single person there is a lifetime actor, right? I mean, right. It's just clear as bell. There's different ways that in the conversation this actually comes up. But none of them were legitimate. However, that doesn't mean that they didn't sweep up into the counterculture useful idiots.
Well, if you think of every deadhead out there and everybody who was at the Woodstock Festival, et cetera, they were all willful idiots. Now, yeah. I do want to answer a question. We should both try to answer this for Uncommon Conspiracies.
I can't see the darn questions.
They should be there in the live chat box on the window I sent you to the right. But Uncommon Conspiracies asks, Uncommon Conspiracies asks, how do we know you guys aren't controlled opposition? And that's really simple to answer, actually. And Giuseppe has answered it down below that. And, we provide all of our citations. So, how you check if someone is telling the truth is you verify the citations. If we provide them, you go and you check them. If they're totally distorted, out of whack, or they don't exist or whatever, we lied. If you check the citations and they check out, it's true. So it's really that simple.
Well, can I comment? I mean, I actually think that's certainly the place to start, but that a really clever, agent can use citations as well.
They usually create a limited hangout, or like 70 facts and 30 BS.
Well, but I think that the really good ones can actually just use the existing facts and try to build a little fantasy world out of them, and then say, here's my case, everything is logical, it's all of their citations. But I do think you're right that that's the first step. I just would point out that even then there is no guarantee. The only thing you can really be absolutely certain of is yourself and your capacity for reason, and that's what I would appeal to. When you look at, for example, like McKenna, right, who claims to be authentic, he's not an agent, his brother's not an agent, and then okay, well, say that that's real, right? Well, then the question is, okay, well, then why would he not engage us in a discussion? Why would he resort to ad hominem? You see, that's why I would say, you get to the, a way that you can become suspicious about the lifetime actor is when you start to present facts that they would then go to fallacy. The argument that they present to you, I mean, if you look at like the exchange between Robert Hunter and Terence McKenna, they can be claiming this is real. They can claim that the drug is giving them ideas, and they can, okay, that maybe this is real, but that doesn't mean they're not part of an operation. You see, that would come through other ways of analysis. So the thing is that um, I think that we should try to develop protocols for detection of, NLP, for detection of agent sophistry, right? And for detection of lifetime actors. I mean, I think that, and these are just the ones on the top of my head, Jan. I mean, I think that there should be a constant effort and a growing one in terms of unification and how many people involved in the detection and explanation to the public about who's in the operation and how they're in the operation and what they do to be in the operation. So all I can say is that I would trust reason. I would trust evidence. I trust the lack of citation. If they go out to fallacy, then you would probably have a pretty good clue. There's lots of ways to do it, and it's a great idea to try to perfect that, to try to make it more, structured, more of a process that everyone knows how to get into and how to get involved with.
I agree. Somebody's asking if we've found any connections to Scientology and the elite. Absolutely. Scientology is absolutely everywhere in MK Ultra. Let's pull up Scientology in the Brain Database. And of course, people can always go to the Gnostic Media website and click on the Brain Database up there at the top. But we have connections there to the OTO, Richard DeMille, whom we exposed with J. Courtney Fikes, was working with the CIA and misleading Jay's research. And then we also have L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard was actually Office of Navy Intelligence, also working with the OTO, influenced heavily by the Satanist MI6 agent Aleister Crowley. Also tied in with Aldous Huxley, Bill Wilson, who started Alcoholics Anonymous, Jack Parsons, again, whom we've exposed over and over, but absolutely, I would say yes on Elron.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of connections into it. I hate to say it, but just any time there is something that either takes a person away from individual political power, like I don't know, just the feminism, for example, or something that the idea is that well, the most classic example, of course, would be Marxism, where you give up your political power to the rulers, but then you'll be wiped out. But don't worry, there's going to be a workers' paradise after you go through this elaborate historical dialectic. Well, OTO creates these authority structures, and that's just a clear tip-off. Like I was getting back to, the clues about what's in the operation, what isn't. Once you give up your kind of ability to be an individual, and there are these people who know better and have all of these ways of trying to perfect you, and you're supposed to lose, your individual identity into this group. Well, it's just like Christianity in the first century. It's just a way to make a person impotent, make them easy to control. That was one of the whole things, in the counterculture is, you have these rock idols that create influence, and so, but you don't even know it, but you're giving up your control. You're giving up your choice of clothes, and then of, how sexuality operates, all the different things that they're giving you influence on. So, Scientology is just suspicious as can be. We should look for organizations to belong to that ask you to do your own thinking, that don't have some kind of prescribed formula that you lose your identity in. I mean, that to me is always the tip on what that is. You go under control of these organizations, and when do you ever pop out?
Yeah.
You don't.
Now let's see. Shem asks, is Megyn Kelly CIA? I think that's a given. I think most news pundits are CIA. We have, what's his name on CNN, who's the Vanderbilt heir. I forget his name, but I think just about all the major TV pundits are within the intelligence community because they're selling a certain agenda. Misty Morrow wants to ask you, Joe, about what was your work on your tone of voice, and she needs help with it. I could probably use help with it too. She wants resources for that.
The thing I used to record my voice was just the recording that you can do in an iMac. But before that, I actually had just a tape recorder. And when I see, it's really funny. Let me just tell you how I got into it. I had a tape recorder that I was using to assist with my research, because a lot of times I'd forget, like I was doing typological connections and stuff, and I would just totally, I go, what was that? So I started to make a habit of recording things, and I overheard myself talking to my wife on a lot of these things, because I'd record, basically I just have it turned on in my den. You've been there, where I'm sitting there trying to fiddle things out. And then my wife would come in and the thing would be playing. And so then when I would go back, I would listen to it. I was fascinated by it, because it really, at times I could see that through the tone of my voice that there wasn't the right spirit in my heart in the conversation, that I had some kind of agenda, anger, or something that was I wasn't being clear with, And so to me, I was just fascinated by that, because I could see that, well, what if I just improve the tone of the voice so that it's more, I'm expressing myself more authentically, Sure. That was, and that was really the whole thing. That for me, it was just that once I got to realize that if I could just get the tone of the voice, even if I was still completely a bastard, inside my mind, if I could just get the tone of voice so that it was real,
Right.
Then and now the thing is that what that did is it made me try to come to grips with being angry.
Sure.
It's like I would not know when my and see what would happen to me, and this probably doesn't happen to many people, but happened to me is that what would happen is I wouldn't realize I was angry, and because of that, then the trajectory of the conversation was affected by anger, and I wouldn't realize that we were heading toward a bad place because I didn't understand my anger, and my anger was creating the thoughts in my head. And all I had to do to fix that, at least over the years, was if I could just get the tone of voice so that I understood where I was emotionally. So that if I was angry, I would start out by saying, well, I'm angry. I would just start out with, I'm angry. I mean, I wouldn't, because you couldn't, how do you control that? But I would always start out saying, okay, well, I'm angry. I would realize what I was. So that was the main thing, is that the tone of voice just led me to understand these simple emotions that I was under the influence of. And then I could see that if I really wanted to get the kind of clarification, in conversation where you really have the communion of ideas, and you get, with a wife, you've got lots of issues. I'm talking about teenage kids. I'm talking about money problems. I'm talking about career issues. These kinds of things you've really got to get straight. And when you have the right tone, I thought, hey, man, I'm just getting all these things, worked out better. They just worked out better because the communication didn't come from a place that was reflecting a hidden emotional agenda, And so right. I just really do believe that if people can just hear themselves, if they can hear where anger is creeping in, or where a lack of, whatever, some kind of negative thing is creeping in, it'll creep into the tone of voice. The voice, man, if you listen to it, and also I like to play poker. You don't ever want to play poker with me. I win every single time because I'm so good at reading the voice. I get people to talk. It's just they can't help themselves. They will always reflect their emotion in some way in the tone of voice. And so table
we have
talk.
A lot more questions here.
Okay, anyway, I'm sorry. That was just my thoughts on that.
Well, and somebody's asking, why don't we talk about the flat Earth? I personally think it's disinfo. I haven't seen strong enough evidence that wasn't fallacious, and not only that, I just don't want to spend the time, but it's nauseating when these flat Earthers have to post a comment about flat Earth irrelevantly under every single video and post and everything that we put up on YouTube or anywhere else. And I typically ban them. So Pseudo Messiah, or no, not Pseudo Messiah, whoever that was that mentioned that, that's why you're on timeout right now. Drake Dorish asked a really good question I wanted to answer. He said, do I still feel the same way about the FOIA requests you gave the CIA? The discussion about records responding, no records responding, can't remember the exact lingo. Yes, they use the word responsive, which means in legal language that there are records that they can respond with. That doesn't mean that they have them or not. All it means is records that they can respond with that are declassified. And then once you get those records, you have to cross-check them with other material, like such that I pulled at Princeton or Yale or Harvard or Stanford, etc., and cross-reference the material, because of course the CIA has slipped in a lot of bogus documents, but by cross-referencing them we can verify them. And I've definitely found bogus documents in the CIA material. Elliot wants Hans on the permanent staff. Hans actually is on the permanent staff. One of these days we're going to start a show with all four of us, with Hans and Steve. Steve had, he and his wife had a baby on Valentine's, and so he's out tending to family now. So congratulations, Steve. You pulled it off and got out of the system and made a family. Good job. And let's see. Somebody else calls the CIA the Cultural Infiltration Agency. That's sort of accurate. I would say they manufacture the culture. They're not really, they'll infiltrate an old culture, but they manufacture culture.
Can I comment? And I just want to say that that's absolutely correct. I always point out, though, that we have to remember that the CIA is not the problem. The fact that, for example, MKUltra existed as a component of the CIA proves that there's something above the CIA. Really, when you talk about the CIA, it's just one of the secret societies that has been created by this organization to be able to, influence, enslave, and genocide us. I mean, you've got Bohemian Grove, you've got high-level Freemasonry, you've got a whole bunch of stuff that Jan and I have been talking about, and they all organize themselves together. I did some analysis on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kesey makes a representation. He calls it the Combine, right? The Combine. It's all of these different things that have been brought together. And the question is, well, what is their, organizing principle? I've given my take as to where I think they could be coming, but no one is sure, in my opinion, as to who they are, what they are. I think here we've given the best, description of them that anyone ever has. But I still will stand on the fact we want to do DNA testing of all of the oligarchs. We need the citizens need a database of all of these guys. We've got to see the hidden family and ethnic connections so that we can, make sense out of what's going on.
Now, somebody had mentioned the MKUltra reunion video, and they had mentioned Sidney Gottlieb. They're referring to Sidney Cohen in that video.
Yeah.
Rattlesnake Breeden has a good comment. He says, Jan, I've been living with the Huichol for 20 years. That's who Jay lived with. And I agree totally on the Peyote Wasson Castaneda, as it was my wife's great uncle, Don Jose Matsua Rios, who Wasson, Ramdas, etc. contacted in the 1960s. So thank you for that confirmation, Rattlesnake.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's
absolutely.
See, this is an example of how useful this. See, this, folks, that is really valuable, because there you have someone who is on the ground, who knows the Huichol, who is actually has a someone that Castaneda was, or was it Wasson, who was claiming
all
to have
of them. Wasson, Castaneda,
okay. And now here you have the public given the truth. See, this is an example, Jan, of what I'm hoping that the new format can do, because what will happen is that people who have that kind of information will give real time and also analytic, information that will help everybody know, well, what happened, what's going on. We have to become basically a replacement for all of the media. All of the media that we experience, CBS, ABC, CNN, Fox News, the movies, the pornography channels, these things are one giant lump of weaponized anthropology. You can't believe a word that, and you can believe that they're always trying to hurt you and hurt you in ways a lot of times you don't even understand. The person asked us, is Megyn Kelly a CIA agent? Who knows? Who cares? She's in on the deal.
Right.
She's in on the deal.
Who knows what agency she works with, but
exactly.
she's peddling the bull.
She's peddling the bull, and we have to stay away from people like this because a lot of times there's sophisticated science in back of what they're doing, which it's really hard to detect. So what we have to do is replace this cesspool of weaponized anthropology with honest researchers, right? And we become cells. I mean, this show isn't going to have like 100 million viewers, but we could have, thousands of viewers who can be engaged with thousands of other people, and then the entire internet world of all of the researchers, the independent researchers who are trying to get to the truth, we can become a kind of replacement, a replacement that will create a chance for the citizen to have real analysis, their own analysis, right? They can do their own research, their own analytic, process to like come to the conclusion about what's real. Like, did Building 7, fall because of, a plane that exploded or something? This is that we can create the opportunity for our own freedom.
Right. Now, one person asked, why did I unfriend them on FB? Typically because they troll, harass, don't read research before they comment, and ridicule and name call. Those are usually the main things. But the biggest one is when people don't study research in full before they decide to comment on it. And then they always want me to take their feedback on my research that they refuse to read in the first place. That's the biggest issue. Now, let's see. Somebody's asking about the new WikiLeaks documents that were released today. I think it's probably a big deal. And as somebody else asked if WikiLeaks was controlled opposition. My personal feeling on WikiLeaks is, it's definitely part of the intelligence community. I think there may be factions within the intelligence community that are just fed up and using WikiLeaks to leak the information out to the public. That's my strongest feeling on that. Of course, Julian Assange was tied into that cult in Australia, the LSD cult and stuff, so we have to be careful with that. But so far, none of the documents themselves have been disproved.
Right. I mean, we have to anticipate, however, that as independent researchers become the replacement of the weaponized anthropology media, that the secret society will have a response. And so you have to, like with Pizzagate, with WikiLeaks, you do have to take them with a little bit of a grain of salt, because it is possible that you're looking at either the beginning of or something that could become a very sophisticated manner of making controlled opposition out of all of the followers of the thing. So I always take those kinds of things with a grain of salt. I always wonder, well, how did it get released? Why is it being released? Is there a motive? On the other hand, I agree with Jan's position. I think that as we sit here, the most reasonable position is that there are some real human beings inside the intelligence system, and they probably are completely fed up because they're probably looking at stuff that we don't even get to see. It's just, I imagine past a certain point, it's just absolutely inhuman and insane what's going on. And so there has to be some point where human beings are actually pressed up against the criminal psychopaths, and hopefully from time to time a courageous one will come forward and give the public some information.
Yeah, and somebody comments, the mighty Wurlitzer is still being played. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. It'll never go down.
One thing I wanted to mention, Joe, is that, one thing that we really try to do, and, I see people thumb downing the video as we're talking. They obviously can't handle facts and research, and they get caught up in emotional, or they're trolls trying to thumb down the show. But one thing I wanted to mention is that what Joe and I really try to do is empower the audience with the information, empower them with the tools for critical thinking so that you can get out, verify things on your own. Joe and I aren't sitting here trying to tell you what to think. We're showing you how to think and where the information is to verify it so that you can go and check it on your own. You know, people need to trust their own five senses. We're not here to sell you some big ad veracundium fallacy. Just believe us. You know, if you have valid research and counter arguments that you've met the onus of proof on, we'll happily, check this information out. But you need to, if you're just ridiculing and you refuse to study things and stuff like that, we're not going to entertain your ideas seriously. But the whole idea is to empower people, to get people free of mind control, to show them how mind control actually works, and different types of mind control, etc., how the CIA has used music and the counterculture and drugs, and going all the way back to Hans and my show in 2015 on the War of the Worlds and H.G. Wells and all that scene over at Princeton that I was investigating. And there is a ton of material there, but by understanding how mind control works, if we can get people to stop ridiculing things that they haven't heard before, they can begin to grasp the information and set themselves free. And yeah, we do have a lot of information. There's 250, 270 shows on the Gnostic Media channel. I mean, that's a ton of material to go through. And I recommend going through almost all of it, especially from episode 49 forward, because that's when we got the trivium, started figuring things out, and, started exposing it. And that's why I did a 180, having been in ethnomycology and ethnobotany for 15, 17 years, and working with all of these people and believing them at face value about their citations. And then one day, Terence McKenna, when I was way back writing my first book, starting to check McKenna's citations, and so many of them were just junk. And, so that kind of clued me into him, that his research, quote-unquote research, wasn't anything that we thought. And then again with Wasson, and then again, over and over and over throughout the entire field of ethnobotany, when you get in and you start investigating these people's, primary documents, they're usually altered, distorted, or non-existent. Or, they just plain old make up the citations, and I've seen a lot of that crap going on too.
Or have omissions like Wasson forgetting to mention in the Life magazine article that, it was actually paid for by MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah.
So let's see. Any other questions up here?
I wanted to comment. I think that.
Wait. Somebody wants us to do a Dalai Lama rant, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you can do that after. I just wanted to comment that I think the, sort of the basic position that we would like people who sort of interact with our work to come to is just an awareness of the possibility and the techniques that, our modern culture were created by. I mean, we show people, how feminism fit in with, Gordon Wasson. We show how Wasson fit in with Edward Bernays. We show how the Grateful Dead fits into both of these things, and then et cetera, et cetera. Basically, we want, in my opinion, what we would hope is that the listener will realize, what has created the weaponized culture that we live in, and then have better tools to be able to create a better life for themselves, right? That's the main thing, is that if you understand the weaponized elements in our culture, the things that the secret society developed just to hurt you. I mean, I'll give you an example. Gloria Steinem, she's speaking in Santa Barbara. Last week, I think she spoke. The people were calling her the great feminist still fighting for your rights,
Yeah, and meanwhile, she's destroying everybody's rights and turning them into slaves.
She's created the single mom. I mean, how did the single mom work out in terms of creating greater strength, freedom for the individuals, right?
Absolutely.
So you see,
and putting the children in daycare while the mom is off at work trying to take care of things.
So that's greater freedom. This is what you want to end up with. So she had the cover story like the Marxists did about the workers' paradise. She had the woman's paradise. But the problem is that in order to get there, you had to completely destroy yourself and everything that was valuable in your life. And the end result was the goal. We got where we are today because this was the goal. This was not just like the victims of Marxism ended up genocided because that was the goal of the Marxist organization. So we've gotten
to the goal of MK Ultra.
Yeah, and we've got to a point where we have a culture that is extremely weak, that is very, very easy to control because the individuals in it have no power. The power comes from family, ethnicity, extended family, political power. It comes from the natural force, right? That had been involved, that we've been involved with for millions of years, that had created family, that had created the relationship of the father. I mean, these are the things that were the targets. So, that's what I hope happens, John, is that people listen to our work, they see the citations, they see the analysis, and they go, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to use that kind of a framework to evaluate my own world. And if they do that, they're going to have a closer relationship to the truth, and then they can make better decisions, have a better life.
Yeah. Now let's see. Going back to the Dalai Lama, so I'm going to pull up the brain again, and let's talk about him for a moment. Now, the 14th Dalai Lama, I forget what the year it was. It was in the 1950s. He was taking receiving $180,000 a year from the 1950s into 1974 from the CIA. He is a CIA agent. He's also a Marxist, and he is a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And, of course, there's been numerous stories coming out of Tibet about these young boys being used by the priest class and, like another pedophile ring. In fact, there was just an article that someone sent me today about that, and I didn't get that in there. But, he was getting the Tibet guerrillas trained in the U.S. He's also promoted transhumanism, the 2045 Avatar Project, etc. But, unfortunately, I don't have any citations for the pedophilia in Tibet thing. Again, I just did get a citation for that. But in the database, if people want to look down here, there's plenty of citations in here about the Dalai Lama's work with the CIA and corruption, etc. And not only that, he's, selling the same agenda. The mysticism is the tool of tyrants. He's the ultimate mystic, but when you get in and you read his stuff, he's not all cracked up. He's not the spiritual leader as people would like to believe.
Sure. I mean, the basic principle is just that if they're a star in the media, they're dirty somehow. They're either a co-opted mystic or useful idiot, or they're actually inside the deal. Because otherwise, why would they be inside the media? I mean, the media has been weaponized. So when you get someone who is a star in the media, I mean, they're not there accidentally. I mean, if you look at, just Dave McGowan's work in the rock stars and their family backgrounds, showing that there was an organized group, obviously, because you can see the military intelligence and all these different elements. Well, what that shows is that this whole idea about, like some guy who comes out of nowhere and then, talent, he becomes a star. That's very, very rare. That is very rare. A much stronger interpretive framework is that they're dirty. That's why they're there. They're not there because they're, you look at why were the Beatles pushed so hard? Well, yeah, they sing well and stuff, but frankly, were they that good? Were they, where do they come from? What's the background? When you see these elements fitting into the process of the weaponization, like the Beatles leading to the Stones, leading to the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, veteran framework, Jan, is just the idea that they're somehow dirty. They're somehow in the operation. The Dalai Lama, really? This kind of, he's got this kind of, why is he being promoted so much? The media is weaponized.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's my thought on him. Yeah.
Oh, somebody asks if we can explain the difference between inductive and deductive and abductive reasoning. You want to give that a shot, Joe, or is that too much? I mean, we could do a whole show on that, probably.
How much time do we have? It's actually quite complicated.
Yeah. I mean, we've got about 15 minutes left, but there's still more questions.
Sure.
You want to give it a shot or just skip it for another time?
I have opinions about this, and I have some background trading in it, but it's just something that's sort of like left field like that. I really would want to be able to spend a little minute studying how I wanted to express that, because this is an area where I have a lot of area of contestation, right, between me and other scholars. And I'm not talking about, you and me typically, but I'm talking about like my work in like the New Testament and stuff. And I'll be criticized, that's you're being inductive, not deductive, and I'll fight back. So I really want to keep my opinions about all that separate, absent of like a little bit of a chance to clarify exactly what I want to say about it.
All right, so let's see. And somebody else mentioned something that you and I have talked about before. It's OSR, our sick reality. What about a class action lawsuit against the CIA for the counterculture manipulation? Joe and I have discussed this topic specifically. It might actually be a good idea.
Great idea.
Or a great idea, but...
it would fail, but it would get publicity. It'd be a way to, people would say...
It would be a way to get a lot of the evidence on the public record, too.
Exactly. Jan, you hit a nail on the head. You would be able to, like, if you had a chance, you just take them to court and say, okay, we think we've got a case. We're going to start out with manufacturing the deadhead. We'd give them that article and then a whole bunch of other stuff. Say, we think that MK Ultra was a deliberate attempt to damage our culture, and we want restitution. There's still a lot of people alive, deadheads and stuff. We want restitution. Now, the media would just go berserk, because this would be ground zero of what they want to not let the public see. So you'd have to deal with all of the the intimidation and the sophistry that would come against it. But you would be able to say, well, look, we want to actually call a few witnesses. And then we just see what happens, right? As to see, because they're still look at the members of the Grateful Dead you could call.
Yeah.
And you could also,
and then play Bob Weir's Bohemian Grove video and stuff. And
sure. I mean, you just make the case and show all the Freemason stuff and go, well, how did Alan Triss come to be your manager before, when you guys were our kind of handler, when you guys were the warlocks? How did he end up with Jerry? And what was Jerry's top secret military clearance? What was that about? How come he dropped out? Osley Stanley, when he was at that St. Elizabeth Hospital, did he ever talk about his training with MK Ultra that was there at the same time? See, these questions they would have answers for, but the questions would be the public would go, wait a second, I didn't know that was. See, there would just be so many connections that would come out in the suit that would be self-evident and impossible to dispute, that even if the overall case was thrown out or whatever, you'd be a really good chance to get that information into the public domain. I think it's a great idea. If someone out there wants to fund it, I'm sure Jan and I will take the ball and run with it.
Absolutely. So we have a few good questions here. Now, one person states that the CIA hasn't done anything illegal. I disagree with that, because the CIA's charter prevents them from operating in the United States, which they've been in violation of since 1947. So I think that getting all of this on the record would be great. Even if we have to go through the legal system, it would still get it on the public record.
Yeah, the idea is promotion. It isn't the idea of winning in the court of law is absurd, because they would control that. But yet you could get the information to the public. The court we have to try to win in is not the legal system. That's a controlled situation. it's like people with Pizzagate wanting to go to the Washington, D.C. authorities or hoping that the government is going to do something. Look, they are the pedophiles, right? They're not going to, the police chief, all these guys, they're not going to help. What we need is greater public awareness. So it's that court we've got to appeal to. That's where we've got to try to win. Our goal is to replace the media, the weaponized media, and because that's what'll get people to understand the reality. When we have we got like 30, 40 million people understanding completely what's going on, then you'll start to see the political changes.
Yeah. Now, a bunch of people commenting on Eddie Bravo. I used to know Eddie Bravo. Yes, I gave Joe Rogan his first dose of DMT. Biggest mistake I ever made. I've talked about that before. I was duped back then, and I was involved in it, and that was before I started checking all of the other, scholars and professors in the field. Started checking all of their primary citations and realized they were all, fudging stuff. So that's why it's so important to go in and check the citations on everything. And once we got the trivium, which was in 2009, that's when things started to unravel. And then by 2012, I had pretty much figured out a lot of the material on Gordon Wasson by then. And then what happened was the entire field of ethnobotany came down on me like a ton of bricks. And like I was talking about earlier, they never once addressed any of my research or citations or anything like that. It was all straw man's, ad hominem attacks, appeals to ridicule. And like I said earlier, to this day, they've still never addressed any of the research. So it goes to show that, or what essentially happened was that when they made this chorus-like attack on me, and you realize, professors and authors, here's the thing about an author is most authors know by default what it's like to get attacked by someone who refuses to read the work and sits there and demanding you take their feedback on their ignorant comments that pertain nothing to what you even wrote. And so when you see 50 or 60 authors and scholars and professors, etc., in a field of research, all of a sudden, in unison, refuse to look at any single citation whatsoever. We're talking citations from Princeton, from Yale, from Harvard, from Stanford, from Columbia, etc. They wouldn't look at or address any of them to this day for 5 years. So that was actually what exposed all of these other agents. If they had just kept their mouths shut and patted me on the back for my Wasson research, I probably would have just left it at that. Although things would have obviously, it would probably have provided leads for other people to figure things out, but it was this massive attack on me that made me realize that most of these guys were in on this crap.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways you can come to understand the breadth of the society, but there are just certain things that they will stand in unison against. It's like I've heard someone who was investigating a pedophile ring in I think it was in the UK, and they came back and said that they were told that by some muckamuck, someone in their chain of command, that in this world there are just certain things you are not permitted to contest and investigate.
Yeah, somebody's making a idiotic question here. Franco, he says, so, Jan, your friend Joe Rogan, I haven't been friends with Rogan since the day I went on his show, is friends with Alex Jones. Does that mean you and Jones are part of a conspiracy? This is one massive illogical non sequitur. Let me get out the leap to conclusions, Matt. I was on Alex Jones' show one time, and that's the only time I've ever been on the Jones show, and he made fun of my name for the entire show, and that was 2 or 3 days after I was on the Rogan show. But I would agree, in my opinion, Alex Jones is likely a lifetime actor, but, he does give out a lot of good information as well. You have to dig through the stuff to, find the golden nuggets.
Well, that's well said. And, the thing is that, it's like people who are saying you're exposing ayahuasca as part of the operation. One of the couple of shows we've done recently, I got some feedback from people. And they say, look, I had a really important experience with it.
Yeah.
And you see, it's just so hard to get this point correct.
They can't get that it's a suggestogen. I laid all of that out in the entheogens article.
It's not just that. I mean, we're not trying to like denigrate or control your individual spiritual life. What we're trying to do is to show the weaponization and the truth of how these things enter into our culture. When you deal with someone like Alex Jones, it's not to say that every single thing that he says is incorrect. Absolutely. On the contrary, the way they don't choose things that are just going to be impossible to swallow. They didn't try to use rhythm and blues as a music that would, kind of circumvent the conscious mind because rhythm and blues was a hard to listen to music. On the contrary, it's because it is so catchy that was why they used it. You got to remember, they don't use things that are not naturally both beneficial and naturally kind of enjoyable. Right. That's how they get us to be controlled. And when you find someone like Jones, my opinion is that, and we've gone into this a bunch of times. That's why I believe it. Is that like 80% of the time he's probably giving information that's valuable, but that gives him a trust component. And then some of the times he can then use that against you. If he is an actor, that's how he operates. So. Sure, a lot of things are good. A lot of the things are not in like a hurtful conspiracy, but that's how they control us. Right. It isn't a surprise and it's like saying, well, everything he says is bad. No, of course not. A lot of what these people tell us is true, is sometimes revolutionary and very important, but it's just sophisticated, kind of ways to develop the trust that later on, in a more important issue, they'll be able to control us with.
Now, Global Tube Truth 2 is asking, how are you, Jan, immune to the suggestibility of the drugs if you've done them so many times and in high doses? Well, I don't do them anymore, and back then I was susceptible to the suggestibility. It was by doing years of research and figuring out and not doing them anymore that we figured it out. Now, I just don't do them anymore. That's the best way to not be vulnerable with suggestogens. So, you have to make logical questions that make sense. I mean, obviously, if I'm not doing them anymore and I figured out how they were being used for this purpose, I just wouldn't do them anymore. And when you realize the agenda that I encourage people to read the Entheogens What's in a Name article. This is the article that it breaks down and explains how they sell the religious experience. Yeah, granted, I've had meaningful experiences on mushrooms and ayahuasca and LSD, etc. myself. At the time, I thought they were meaningful, and I was well into it. And then when I realized all of this research and how it was being used, it gave me a different perspective. It made me realize that I was being led into Pan's garden to navel gaze and waste my life away in extended adolescence rather than building a family, rather than building a future, rather than empowering other people to see this stuff. So, that's why I changed. But, you have to think through if you're, and the issue is even the names themselves, even if you've ever heard a Beatles song, all of these things impact the outcome of the suggestibility of these substances. They are suggestogens. They increase hypersuggestibility. So it doesn't matter if you sit in a dark room by yourself and you think, oh, well, I can't be affected by other people since it was in a dark room by myself. That's not true. If you've ever heard Carl Ruck's word entheogen, whom I've exposed, or Humphrey Osmond's word psychedelic, whom I've exposed, you've already had that imprinted in your mind. The word entheogen implies that you will have a religious experience. The word psychedelic implies that you will have a mind manifesting experience. The word psychotomimetic means that you will have a psychosis mimicking experience or schizophrenogen, etc. So these words describe exactly what the substances cause, and if you're aware of this, obviously you can impact its, or control its impact or limit its impact of suggestibility on you. But it's, I mean, why even take them anymore if you're aware of the agenda? You know, it doesn't, you know, there's no point in taking them anymore at that point.
So, Jan, the time has flown by.
Yeah, it has. I guess we're done, huh?
Hey, well, we're done, bro. I'm going to check out now. We'll be back next week, same time. So,
oh yeah, don't forget websites and donations and
donations. Gosh darn it, the donate. Go to CaesarsMessiah.com. There's the donate button. And Jan, I've been getting some donations, and I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone. How do people make donations to you?
Go to gnosticmedia.com and click up at the top. There's a donate button, or there's a big icon up there at the top as well. We appreciate it, and really can't do it without the audience support.
Buy the books.
Buy the books. Buy the archives. Buy a membership for the website, etc. So anyway, everybody, that's it for this week. We'll see you next. Until then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.